The PocketBook is purely for reading. You know, it's this really nice, wakes up very quickly, looks like a book, feels like a book in the hand, really ergonomic design, especially where they put the buttons here. And you can kind of hold it one-handed and your thumb just naturally falls where that forward button is. And you can kind of, without really moving the thumb much, you can kind of just move it on. It's really quite pleasant to do that. It does have what's called a smart light. It can change automatically, but I actually quite like the kind of swipe up and down here, because generally you aren't using it like a tablet. It is not a tablet, even though they call it an InkPad, it is just for reading really. And if you just treat it like that, if you just treat it as a reader, then I think it's a really good one for you. Now, I just want to point out, you can do some other things on here. If I go back out of this book, you do have apps. And if I go into there, you do have, for instance, a browser. The browser is a little bit of a smeary mess when you get it going, really. But I have been using, I have no idea why it starts going to this Aubrey page and then redirects you to google.com. I have no idea why it does that. You can probably set a homepage somewhere. Maybe I should have tried that by now. But I've been going to Project Gutenberg a lot and getting my books on here, because if you're happy reading classics, you can find an awful lot on here. But I just want to show you, when I start swiping around on here, I just want to show you what a kind of smeary mess the browser does become. What it does is it does that quick refresh until it's ready. You think, oh, stop moving the screen now. You know, so you can manage like that. It's okay. But then it does a full screen refresh when you're ready to read. So again, if you're looking to read on the web, that'll probably be okay. And I don't know why they've tucked away the home button, for instance, on here, and your other options and things like that as well. And there are some other apps on here as well, but you've got whatever PocketBook in their wisdom have decided to give you. That's probably good enough. I quite enjoyed playing some solitaire on here recently. You call it Klondike, do you? You know, I played on the plane for a little while. That was pretty good. Had a good experience with that. And yeah, again, you can just see I can move anything around. Yeah, that's 6. You know, it's not like really nice dragging it around. It's like clicking it and then moving it. It's not going to give you the kind of animations that you'll be used to on a lot of other tablets. But, you know, it has some other good options. And I think the thing about it is that placement of the thumb buttons for the page turn is really well designed for holding it one-handed like this. You sort of rotate your thumb slightly to make that page turn. Scrolling through the kind of library that I've got on it. I also really quite like this size for reading. One thing that really annoys my wife with smaller e-readers is having to click or swipe too regularly. So this is nice because you can fit quite a lot of information on one page. And, you know, you don't have to change pages every sort of 10, 15 seconds. You've got a minute or so on each page and you get the sort of normal size of a paperback page, really. You get a lot of information on one screen at one time. If you're just looking at something in color, I'll go back to home there. For instance, some William Blake. As long as what you're looking at is a static page, this is a good place to do it. As long as what you're looking at is just an image or a text on screen and you need to change it, it changes quickly. Look, can you see that? And it looks good in color there as well. So, you know, it's a good reader. Now, the antithesis of this is the Boox Palma. Now, if you do need things to move around on the page, this is a good option. One thing, I've said it a few times, I think, but it needs is a thumbprint reader as well. For this, if you're someone who needs to use different libraries, then I think this is a really good option. So here you can, of course, go into your Kindle library, for instance. You can go into any library that you can choose to download on. And I've been looking at using graphic novels recently. I also brought this little case recently for it, and I thought it might make it just that little bit easier to hold. I sometimes find when it's out of the case, it sort of slips out of your hand. And talking about this with other people, lots of people are finding they have lots of bumps and scrapes on their Boox Palma because it's quite a sort of easy to slip out of your hand device. I actually wish I hadn't bought this. I don't think this was the right case to buy, just honestly, because it just makes it a little bit bigger than you want, really. Now it makes it a little bit kind of chunky, you know, that thickness compared to that thing. This is almost doubled in thickness, look. And I kind of think that actually maybe I should have stuck with it as it was. And although it sometimes slips out of your hand, that slippiness also means it slips in and out of your pocket really nicely. So you lose that a little bit by using that. And also these buttons are actually really nicely designed. and they're quite nice to press, and you can hold it like this and press the side button to do moving on the kind of focus panel of this graphic novel here. I think maybe it's nicer like that. And also the buttons, as I say, they were quite nice to press. They were quite well placed as well, and maybe they could be placed a little bit further down. But then when you put it in this case, you're only pressing this kind of mushy kind of bump here rather than the button itself. And actually I find that sometimes you press the wrong direction with that little mushy thing as well. And also this clasp falls right where your thumb is, and it's just that little bit now too big for your hand, whereas before it was a little bit too small. I hope there'll be some third-party cases coming along soon. And what a lot of people do is they mod their cases. So they either get the half case, which I guess the half case is probably just this piece, and they've kind of added this on, making it a lot thicker, but to enable it to be a kind of closable case, and it's got a little magnetic clasp there, right in the wrong place. But people actually just mod the little half case, put stickers, they put the pop sockets on to allow them to hold it. But maybe actually just mod the outside of this, maybe just put something to give you a bit of grip on the back there, one of those little sort of loops, or a little pop socket, just free-em it to the back there. Just that might make it actually really quite good. So I'm thinking I might just carry on living with it without the case. And the screen doesn't need that much protecting because e-ink screens are pretty durable. This is something quite different to the PocketBook. Although it's called the PocketBook, this isn't pocket size. This one is the pocket size option. And I think really this is probably the sort of two best options right now for you in e-readers. If you want a pure reader, look at PocketBook and look at Boox. PocketBook have different sizes as well, whichever one will suit you. If you find this one a little bit narrow, because talking about, not having to refresh the page so often, this is a smaller screen area and it's quite a narrow screen as well. This is good for portability, but you might want something a little bit wider. So look at the Boox page, which has the great BSR technology, which is doing that great job of refreshing that screen. You can see how it really still looks crisp without having to do that full page refresh. This is incidentally displaced, which is all about how Japanese folks were treated in America during the war. So it's an interesting read on at the minute. But do you see that? Watch the screen. Watch the apps. See the ghosting just disappear. See that? Still there slightly, but you can just see it be removed afterwards. That is the Boox Super Refresh technology, which is doing that. And the Boox page has that as well. It's running Android 11. But that's that type of device, a full Android type of device. But this PocketBook is the kind of really the height of restful kind of ergonomic place to read your kind of classic novels if you're into that, or whatever you're into. It's the height of just kicking back and relaxing and getting to grips with some real text. I think PocketBook are excellent for that. Yeah, we've already mentioned it, but the case is really, really good. Palma seems too narrow for a pocketable e-reader notepad. Yeah, it's not a notepad, importantly. So it isn't what you're going for. A bit bigger like a Samsung S23 or 4 Ultra. So yeah, that's a good kind of size comparison to make. I mean, it's not much bigger, but the screen is obviously edge to edge. So they're roughly the same size, but the screen is edge to edge on the Samsung Ultra kind of size. So yes, you're right. That's a couple more words probably that you could get on a screen at this size. Color would be cool too. I'm sure that'll come in that kind of size. It already does exist in some companies. Is that the Hisense phones have a color version at that size. So yeah, that is a kind of possibility. I think with screen size with e-ink, you've got to remember that it's only really produced by e-ink. E-paper screens are only really produced by e-ink. And so there's limitations. It's not like you can buy a panel and say, send them at this size. It's what's coming out of the factory and what can you get on those.